welcome to Working Capital and Asset Management Part 2. Now we're going to continue our conversation on inventory management, specifically the JIT, just in time. Now this is a technique that minimizes the inventory investment to the lowest possible amount by having materials arrive exactly at the time they're needed for production. Something that car manufacturers did a great deal of progress in developing and utilizing JIT to its maximum potential. Now the objective is to minimize the inventory investment. So you want to use no or very little safety stock. You want the inventory to arrive just as you need it. So basically the inventory is held within hours or minutes of use. So this takes a lot of coordination between suppliers and employees, shipping companies. Everything must be put in place so things can arrive just in time. So processes, forecasting, commitment, all has to be lined up perfectly so that a small amount or no inventory can be held and the inventory needed for that day can arrive that day. Now, if the materials don't arrive, the shutdown of production happens immediately. So it's a riskier system, but it's a system where you can generate, you could have, previously some of these companies had 30, 40, $50 million in inventory that was able to reduce those inventories down to 5 million. So going from 50 million to 5 million, you're saving $45 million in inventory, and that's cash recovered. So generally what companies will do is they'll encourage their suppliers. So if you're an automotive company or maybe a computer manufacturing company that makes PCs, you'll encourage your suppliers to move very close to your production facility. And then you'll have either dedicated shippers or couriers to bring the inventory over as it's needed. So, or you could have a retailer, maybe someone like a Walmart, look at the inventory used for the day, place an order, and have it refilled by the next morning. Anything to really reduce the amount of inventory on hand. And this system for retailers and manufacturers has been working pretty well. In fact, I remember when I was younger, most retailers had a huge amount of space dedicated on site to a back storage facility. So you'd be in the front of the store, and if they had run out of something, they had maybe 60% of the inventory on the floor, another 40% in the back stock room that could be replenished as it was running out. And today, stores are designed where there's very little to no back stock. Everything is delivered and then placed on the shelf, which makes utilization of space better, sales per square foot higher, and reduction of inventory and increasing of cash. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Now, speaking of Walmart, at a certain point, Walmart focused on RFID tags, radio frequency ID tags, RFID. And this was something that Walmart began to utilize these RFID technology to improve its inventory management, and specifically starting in 2004. Now, the high cost of these tags, somewhere between 50 cents and $1, really limited their use. So they couldn't be used at a per product level, but they could be used at a shipping container level. So for better, and what's useful with the RFID is that they don't have to be directly scanned. The radio signals can be picked up pretty quickly, and a whole truck can be inventoried in seconds. It's one of the ways that Amazon has a grocery store where you put everything in your shopping cart and you just wheel your shopping cart through a couple of gates, and using RFID is able to ring up all of the costs of the items and then charge it directly to your account, including your own RFID tag that you bring into the store. So the benefits that Walmart would receive, it had to work with its suppliers to be able to get the technology on incoming shipments so they could more easily take inventory. So if you had, theoretically, if you had a store where there was an RFID tag on every first sale item in the store, with the press of a button you can do inventory accurately with everything that's in the store. You can do continuous inventory where you could see levels of inventory for every product at every particular point in time, including the products in shoppers' carts. So it's a really useful technology, but it still hasn't come close to the cost of barcodes. So barcodes are fractions of a penny to or a fraction of a penny to place or have an item's label, where RFID is still a more expensive technology. But it's a system helping to bring in just-in-time inventory more easily. Now let's move on to computerization systems and resource control. So materials requirement planning, MRP, is a system used by most, if not all, manufacturers. And it's a computerized system where inventory management is applying EOC concepts, where the computer will compare production needs to available inventory balances and determine what orders should be placed for various items on the bills on a product's bill of material. Now, a bill of material is like a recipe. So for a bill of material, say you're going to make chocolate chip cookies and you need to know what to go and buy. So you look in the recipe and it says butter, chocolate chips, flour, sugar, vanilla extract. So you know, okay, these are items I have to procure. So a bill of material is just a recipe for the products that a company is making. So the MRP system will look to see, okay, there'll be a forecast set up and they'll say, okay, we need to make this many products, we have this much inventory. Okay, we're going to need to have to build 200 more items. Let's look at the bill of material, figure out what raw materials need to be purchased, and then signal that they need to be purchased for the new production. Now, Materials Resource Planning 2, or MRP2, is a more sophisticated computer system that integrates information from finance, accounting, marketing, engineering, manufacturing, and generates production plans on numerous financial and management reports. So MRP2 is a more involved system that's going to work with the integration of many different points in the company, so it can more accurately plan the production and the materials purchasing requirements needed for that production. So that's sort of an evolution. Then the next step companies moved to was an ERP system, Enterprise Resource Planning System. And I spent a great deal of time working with ERP, especially SAP, which is a computer system or a computer program that runs the entire company. So it electronically integrates external and internal information from a firm's, external information from firm's suppliers and customers, and internal information from the firm's departments. So the data and information becomes a resource, and human production needs and materials can be instantly obtained to eliminate production delays and cost control. So what an ERP system will do, it will say, at the point of order, the customer's ordering products coming in through customer service, these will become a backlog. So we'll say, okay, these are all the products that are going to be ordered today and need to be shipped out. So as the inventory declines, MRP works with ERP to say, okay, we need to buy these raw materials, sends the information over purchasing cuts purchase requisitions to buy those materials. The materials come in and it alerts manufacturing with work orders that you need to build these finished goods in order to replenish the stock that was sold today. So all these systems are working together, so that way it's all worked off a master forecast, where the forecast says this is how many we expect to sell, and as we see the sales occurring, the inventory declining, the ERP system is way ahead, ordering the new materials for the new products to be placed, planning the production orders, allocating the labor and time and space for the production to be built, and all the while signaling management to any bottlenecks or any delays that may be occurring in running the business. So it's a vastly useful program for creating efficiencies and profits within a company. And most companies today use some sort of ERP system like SAP, JD Edwards, Oracle, PeopleSoft to run the enterprise on a highly integrated informational basis. Okay, so let's move over to managing accounts receivable. So accounts receivable, what is accounts receivable? Basically is you lend your customers, you sell your customers products on credit. So the customer buys, and this is very popular for business to business, where businesses sell to other businesses. So a supplier like Rubbermaid selling to Walmart, or a defense contractor selling to the government, or to another defense subcontractor. And basically you are extending credit for people to buy your products. Now, this is a component of the cash conversion cycle, because you want to know, once you extend the credit, how long before you collect the credit. So the average collection period has two parts. One, the time from the sale until the customer actually mails the payment. And the time from the payment is mailed until the firm actually collects the funds and has the cash in their bank account. So the objective for managing accounts receivable is to collect money as quickly as possible without losing sales from pressuring high pressure collection techniques or rigid credit standards. So the companies go, of course, they want to. There are three main topics: credit selection and standards, credit terms, and credit monitoring. Now the trick is that you don't want to um, be so constricting on your credit that customers rather deal with a competitor. So you have to look at the marketplace, your position in the marketplace, to be able to see how far, what's the industry norms that we can put in place without any question from our competitor, from our suppliers. But what else could we do that they're likely to put up with that could encourage them to pay more quickly? Now, when in accounts receivable, which was actually my first job after college, there are credit selection and standards. And I remember, setting credit terms and credit limits on customers using a very similar approach. And we would call this the 5 C's of credit. First is the character. What is the record of this customer's meeting past obligations? Are they like a Lannister? Do they always pay their debts? That's the history of a company and their credit worthiness is built on the character and relationship between the company and the supplier. Capacity. What is the applicant's ability to repay the requested credit? So big companies have a huge capacity to repay credit. Smaller companies, you're taking more of a risk. They may not have the money to repay you. Then capital. The applicant's debt to equity. Again, this plays into the size. How much cash does a company have and how much equity does a company have in its business? So this is important because companies with higher equity have an easier time of converting equity in cash by selling assets to pay off debt. Now, collateral. What type of assets could be used to secure credit? Homes, businesses, real estate. These are different things that can collateralize debt and make it safer. And then conditions. What is the general industry-specific economic conditions and unique conditions surrounding specific transactions? So each creditor, each credit deal or credit analysis has its own specific conditions that have to be reviewed. Now, credit scoring is a way to some sort of methodology you put up to grade or score your suppliers to figure out how to really rank them or put them on a scale that would be a credit score. It's similar to what people have their individual credit scores from credit scoring agencies. So if you look at the applicant's scores and the key financial and credit characteristics, you can put together some sort of methodology from scoring them from, terrible risk to very safe risk. And credit scoring, like I said, is applied to businesses as it is to individuals as well. And they each have different criteria. Now, so sometimes a firm is going to think about changing its credit standards in an effort to improve its sales and returns or profits. So to create greater value for its owners, they have to think about changes and effects on profits, as change in the credit standards from relaxing to tightening will have an effect. So if we're going to relax our credit standards, the sales volume is likely to increase because more people can apply for credit and more people will meet the credit needs as you lower the standards. Investment in accounts receivable will increase as you'll take in more accounts on credit. And the bad debt expense is likely to increase as you're going to expect more accounts to be uncollectible. Now, if sales volume increases, that's a big positive for profits. But the increase in accounts receivable is negative as more cash is needed and has to be paid for to support accounts receivable. And bad debt expense will have to also pull in the cash, which will have to be borrowed at a cost. So, you don't want to relax your credit standards so much that nobody's paying you back, or the amount of you're not getting paid back is far exceeding the extra profits you're making. So it's a balancing act. Let's look at this example for Dodd Tools. It's currently selling products for $10 per unit. Sales on old credits from last year were 60,000 units. A variable cost is $6 per unit. The firm's total fixed costs are $120,000. The firm currently is thinking about relaxing his credit standards and expecting the following results: a 5% increase in sales, an increase in the collection period from 30 to 45 days, and an increase in bad debt expense from 1 to 2%. And bad debt expense is the total percentage of accounts receivable that isn't paid back. So a firm's required rate of return on risk investments with the opportunity cost of tying up funds, we're going to say, is 15%. So let's look at this some more. So because fixed costs are a sunk cost and therefore unaffected by the change in sales level, the only relevant cost is the change in variable costs. So the 5% increase or 3,000 unit increase in sales, the profit expected per unit will equal the difference between the sales price and the variable costs of $6. So it's going to be $4 per unit. So the total contribution will be $12,000 or 3,000 times $4. So we're going to get an additional $12,000 of profits from doing this. Now, determine the cost of the marginal investment in the accounts receivable. This company must find a difference between the carrying costs of receivables under the two different credit standards, because it's concerned with the out-of-pocket costs and the relevant costs of the variable cost per sales unit. So the average investment in the accounts receivable can be calculated using the following formula: total variable cost of annual sales divided by turnover of accounts receivable. So the turnover accounts receivable is 365 divided by total collection period. Okay, so variable costs. We have, under the present plan, $6 times 60,000 units. Under the new plan, $6 times 63,000 units. So the turnover of the accounts receivable is the number of times each year the accounts receivable is actually turned into cash. So for example, if you had $100 in accounts receivable, and you had collected $1,000 in sales, then the turns are 10. So let's just look under this plan. We have, on the current plan, we have the turnover rate for the current plan is 12, and the proposed plan, which extends the collection period to 45 days, goes to 8.1. So substituting the cost of and turnover data just calculated in the previous slide into the average investment in the accounts receivable equation for each case, we can get the following average investment in accounts receivable. So we take the current plan divided by the turnover, and we take the new plan divided by the turnover. So we get the average invested in accounts receivable. So we see accounts receivable goes from 29,000 to 46,000. Now, so the average investment under the proposed plan is 46. The current plan is 29. So there's an increase in accounts receivable of 17,000. And if we look at the required rate of return on the investment, or 0.15, we see that the cost of this additional cash we're tying up in accounts receivable is $2,500. So the value of $2,500 is considered a cost because it represents the maximum amount that could have been earned on the 17,159. Had it been placed in an equal risk investment alternative with a return of 15%. So now if we look under the cost of the marginal bad debts, we go from 2% from the current 1%, so that increases by 6,600. So if we put this all together, we have the additional profits generated, we have the increase in accounts receivable and the cost of that increase in accounts receivable, and then we have the cost of the increase of bad debts, and we see that the net profits from implementing this plan are additional $2,826. So that would say that this would be a plan we should do because it's generating more cash for us than it's eroding. Okay, now let's look at accounts receivable management, credit selection, and standards. So the credit management, when you're working in credit management, it's difficult, for managers of domestic companies, purely domestic companies, to really be able to set standards and select the appropriate amounts of credit to extend. So these tasks, of course, become much more difficult internationally when you're dealing with foreign currencies, foreign currency risk. You're dealing with delays of shipment of goods and products and payments between international borders, as well as international conflict and different laws and regulations between countries. Now, when we're looking at credit terms, each customer generally is treated differently, and we can select different terms uh, suitable to that customer. So if we wanted to make a more credit terms that would collect money faster, we could give what's called a cash discount. So we could create terms where for certain customers or for all customers, depending on how we want to extend the credit terms, we could put a discount. So we could say 210 net 30, which would be a 2% discount if you pay in 10 days. Otherwise, you pay the full percentage in 30 days. So this would encourage some of the customers to pay in 10 days. They could receive the 2% discount. Now, the credit terms, I remember one company we worked for. Some of the customers were so bad that the credit terms were basically cash on delivery. So once we delivered the product to you, you had to pay us in cash. Some credit terms were 30 days. Some customers got 210 net 30. In some cases, some customers were extended to 60 days, depending on their needs, requests, and creditworthiness. Now, the cash discount period. It's the number of days beginning of the credit period which the discount's available, generally 10 days. And you'll find when you set this up, you could do 210 net 30 or 210 or 220 net 30, and these changes will affect, will basically these changes will encourage customers to use your credit more. So maybe it could increase sales as it attracts new customers, encourage current customers to use more credit. It will help to lower bad debt expense because there'll be more people paying early, which is a good effect on profits. Now the profits would decrease because you're giving a discount. That's going to affect. So there's benefits and negatives to this. And there are some customers who will pay in 30 days and take the discount anyway. And those are special types of customers that you'll have to, they'll just send a check for 98% of the order and pay in 30 days because they think they're entitled to the discount in the 30-day period when you clearly stated it's 10 or 20. So there could be complications with establishing this policy with customers taking advantage of it as well. So to do an example, Max Company has annual sales of 10 million, an average collection period of 40 days. So that's a accounts receivable turnover of 9.1 days. In accordance with the credit policy of net 30, the period is divided into 32 days under the customer's place in payments in the mail. Because so not everyone pays in 30 days, and there's 8 days to receive. So where the process of the collection payments, once they are mailed, there's a delay. So they're considering cash discount in exchange to get a 2% discount in exchange to get paid early. So they expect this to reduce the amount of time until the payments are placed in the mail, resulting in a collection period of 25 days, which would take the turnover rate to 14.6. So if we look at this, if we have an average investment without discounts of 9.1, that will give us an investment of 278,000. So this is the original profit contribution from sales. So if we do the proposed discount, that's going to is at 14.6. It's going to have a change of 181. So the reduction in accounts receivable investment will be $96,000 as accounts receivable will shrink quickly because more people are paying early to receive the the discount. Now the cost and savings from a reduced investment. So this means that we're reducing our investment by 96,000 multiplied by the rate of return. This is what we're saving by reducing accounts receivable. But we have that cash discount, which is 2% on 0.8% of the orders. So that's going to equivalent to a cash discount of 55,000. And so the proposed profit, if we look at the increase in sales, the reduction in accounts receivable, the cost of the cash discount, we're losing $6,000 if we were to set this in motion. So something to think about. Now, continuing with the credit terms, if we look at the credit period is the number of days after the beginning of the credit period until the full payment in the account is due. So generally a credit period can be 30 days. So changes in the credit period are the number of days after the beginning of the credit period until the full payment of the credit is due also affects the firm's profitability. So if a firm increases its payment period from net 30 to net 45 days, customers will love that because they have an extra 15 days to pay. This should increase sales as the more customers find your terms better than competitors and switch to you. Something it's sort of what originated behind that. A lot of credit card deals where there's 0% interest for 6 months. So you want to go to that credit card or that company or that car company to get that 0% interest for the first year or 6 months because it's better terms, and that increases sales, increases profits. But the investment in accounts receivable and bad debt expense would also increase and negatively affect profits. So whenever you change the collection period, you're going to have to look at how it affects the whole process. Now, credit monitoring is the ongoing review of accounts payable. So determine whether customers are paying in accordance of the stated terms. So you can't just set it and forget it. You have to, once you establish your credit terms and you start lending on credit, you have to review to see, are your customers paying in a timely manner? And you only can do that as you're monitoring the credit. So you can set alerts where they can send you alerts when they're past due. And you can send these alerts to the customers as well, reminding them that they have to pay up. So slow payments are costly because it lengthens the average collection period, and that increases the investment in accounts receivable. So two frequently used techniques for credit monitoring are average collection period and age of accounts receivable. So the average collection period, we look at one, the timing of sales from the customer places until the payment comes in the mail, and the time to receive, process, and collect the payments once it's been mailed to the customer. So the formula is finding the collection period as accounts receivable divided by average sales per day will give you your average collection period. Assuming receipts, processing, and the collection time is constant, the average collection period tells you, or tells the firm on average, when its customers are paying their accounts. So this is good to know because we want to know how quickly are they paying their accounts. Are they averaging 30, 35, 40 days? Now, an aging schedule is a credit monitoring technique which breaks down accounts receivable into groups on the basis of their time of origin. It indicates percentages of total accounts received, balances, and outstanding portions specific periods of time. And this is basically what an aging will look like. We could see the outstanding balance in different points of time and percentage of the total outstanding balance. So when I worked in accounts receivable, we didn't worry about accounts that were 0 to 30 days because, the higher this portion, the better, because these are people that, still are still within the credit terms and haven't yet paid late. So 30 to 60 days would typically, for most companies, would be late. 60 to 90 days would be very late, and 91 to 120 days is extremely late, and over 120 days is probably not going to pay. So what we would do as in accounts receivable, we would start by calling the customers, starting with 120 days over and working our backwards to 30 to 60 days, and call our customers to remind them or send them, done them and send them an email or a letter reminding them that they're past due. You could even call them and talk to them directly. I know that when I worked in accounts receivable, nobody wanted to pick up the phone when the accounts receivable person was calling because they're a bill collector. So one trick I used to have is I used to call their accounts payable department, and they always answer the phone in accounts payable because it means they're collecting money. So I'd call accounts payable, and I'd get Tanya in accounts payable and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to get Julie in accounts receivable. Can you transfer me over?" So then Tanya would transfer me to Julie, and Julie would see her phone ring, and, "Oh, it's Tanya. She probably wants to go to lunch." She'd pick up the phone. "Hi, Tanya." I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's not Tanya. It's Mike with XYZ Company, and I wanted to talk to you about collecting our money, that our terms that we lent you." And then once I got through to a live person, they can give me a reason why they haven't paid, or give me a date or estimate of when they would pay. So you have to get creative when you work in accounts receivable because people don't want to pick up the phone when you're calling to collect money. Now, different techniques that all companies use is you could send letters. So after the account is somewhat delinquent, you can send a letter explaining in the invoice what they owe and how they're outstanding the credit terms. You can call them directly, which I just talked about. You can make a personal visit. If you have one large client, you can actually take a visit to them, or if the clients aren't too far away, a personal visit can probably sometimes be the most effective. Collection agencies, you can turn over to a collection agency to collect the money for you, or you can take legal action to try to recover the money in a lawsuit. Now, float is another process where money isn't, especially if you're being paid by check, isn't being transferred immediately. So a mail float is a delay between when the payment is placed until when it's received. A processing float is the time it takes to receive the payment, open the envelope, deposit it into your account. And the clearing float is the time it takes the bank account to actually clear the funds and make them available to you. So you can see that these floats add up to be an extra delay in getting your money. That's why a lot of businesses will prefer you pay on credit card or you do electronic wiring to reduce this float. Now, what companies can do is they can speed up collections. So if you're a company that's collecting checks from around the world or around the country, you may want to set up lock boxes. So this is a technique where you can speed up collections by putting a collection procedure which customers mail payments to a post office that is close to where the company is and regularly emptied by a bank who processes the payments and deposits them into your account. So this speeds up the collection and reduces the processing time as well as mail time. So if you had receiving checks from every country in the world, you may want to put a lockbox system in every country, and the checks can be sent locally from inside the country to a lockbox, deposited, and then the bank will actually process the checks and deposit them for you, and then they'll email you or mail you copies of the checks, which you can use to reconcile your system. So a very popular way of speeding up a collection and reducing the float. Now, the float is definitely a component in the average payment period. So it's a strategy of using mailing points and bank accounts to further lengthen the mail float and clearing float, respectively. So if you're actually making payments, you may want to try to, if the bank's in New York and the address to send the checks in New York, you may actually want to cut the check from Hawaii to be mailed to New York rather than New Jersey. It's sort of a game to try to delay the float. Now, the U.S. Postal Service did create some problems and created some opportunities for banks as the Postal Service had been struggling financially and they wanted to cut or reduce the amount of processing facilities. Other banks would step in to kind of fulfill this this designation of receiving the check more quickly and sort of pick up where the post office were dropping off. So this means companies, the float, if this would happen without change, the float would increase. But the banks would take the opportunity to introduce a new remote lockbox capture program, which would process business-to-business payments received directly at local post offices around the country. So then would make electronic images of these payments, and the images would be processed at the bank's processing hub, and then customers would be able to reduce the mail flow and speed up collections for its clients. So banks see opportunities of enhancing their lockbox systems because customers will pay for that. Now, stretching your accounts receivable, is it ethical to delay payments to other people or companies? So if you're stretching your accounts payable, it means that you're just trying to delay payments. And if you're short on cash and you can delay your rent or you could delay payments to suppliers and you stretch when you mail out your checks to make sure you can cover them, you can kind of keep yourself afloat longer. But is it fair when you promise to pay in a certain period of time and you don't pay? And this will put additional pressures on the cost of the companies you're working with. So it raises some ethical concerns if you're violating agreements or things your company agreed to, or you're losing face as a company if you're purposely trying to increase the float or delay your payments from being received. Okay, so let's talk about cash concentration. As cash pools, in particular lockboxes and other deposits collected in banks around the country, you often want to consolidate them into one concentrated account. And the advantages are having a large pool of funds makes it easier to make short-term investments, or makes it easier to make bigger purchases, or to utilize that money for bigger purchases if it's in one single pool. It improves the tracking control of the firm's cash. Everything's sort of in one place, one account to check. It enables the firm to implement payment strategies to reduce idle cash and just use the cash more effectively, to consolidate the cash into one account as quickly as possible. Now, Depository transfer check is a way of drawing a check to draw from one bank account to another. Automatic clearinghouse is sort of is a electronic withdrawal, like a sweep through accounts to pick the money up and put it into one bank account. And a wire transfer is a way to electronically wire money between banks and between bank accounts. Now, a zero balance account is a disbursement account that always has end of day balance is zero. So as soon as this account gets the money, at the end of the day, it sends it to the concentration account and draws the account back down to zero for the next day. So this is a way of trying to maintain those concentration accounts and clean out all your secondary accounts. In a personal finance example, let's look at Megan here, 25-year-old nurse that works at the hospital that pays her every 2 weeks by direct deposit into her checking account, which pays no interest and no minimum balance required. So she takes home about $1,800 every 2 weeks and about $3,600 per month. She maintains a checking balance of around $1,500. So whenever there's an excess amount, she transfers it into her savings account, where it's 1.5% annual interest, which today is a great amount of interest to get in your savings account. She currently has a savings balance of $17,000 and estimates that she transfers about $600 per month from her checking account into her savings account. So she pays her bills immediately, and then when she receives them, her monthly bills average about $1,900, and her monthly cash outlays for food and gas are about $900. So the analysis of her bill payments indicates that on average she pays her bills 8 days early. Most marketable securities are currently held for 4.2% interest. So Megan is interested in learning how she might better manage her cash balance. So what she can do, I guess she talks to her sister, who had a finance course and came up with 3 ways for her to better manage her cash. 1, invest the current balances. 2, invest the monthly surpluses. And 3, slow down payments. So what this would mean would be a total of, she would increase her annual earnings by about $673. Clearly she can grow her earnings by better managing her cash. So basically just bringing more of her cash into her savings account or investing it in better marketable securities and not paying her bills so early and holding more cash to earn interest on it. Now, big companies, they could at particular times they can have large sums of cash they don't need immediately. So if they have large sums of cash, they're going to want to put it into a marketable security, which typically earns more return, more interest than a regular savings account. So they can put it into treasury bills, notes, or bonds, which have different maturities and different interest rates. They can put in agencies of the federal government, such as Ginnie Mae's and Freddie Mac's, or in commercial paper, CDs, which can be commercial deposit at banks. All these pay a higher rate of interest. There's also commercial paper, which is bonds in companies. They could be a banker's acceptance, which is a bank guarantee of interest on the money, Euro-dollar deposits, money market or mutual funds, or repurchase agreements. So marketable security is a way of companies taking their excess cash and investing it for a little bit of extra money. If you're a company that's big enough that you might have billions of dollars in your cash account, even a small increase in return, say 1-2%, can throw off millions of dollars of extra cash a year. So companies are very encouraged to, a treasurer or financial manager of a company will have to really look at all their options and make sure they move their money, even if it's temporary. They don't need these $4 billion for 5 days. Move it somewhere it can earn some interest, move it back, and then utilize it however you need to utilize it. So this is a key aspect of the project of the cash cycle, the cash management, is to bring the cash to get the highest return when it's sitting idle. Okay, so let's review. Over the course of Chapter 15, we looked at and got a better understanding of working capital management, net working capital, and the trade-off between profitability and risk. We looked at the cash conversion cycle, its funding requirements, and key strategies for managing the cash conversion cycle. We talked about inventory management, different views, common techniques, international concerns. We talked about the economic order quantity, just-in-time inventory systems, MRP, MRP2, and ERP systems for managing inventory production and companies' overall expenses related to that. We talked about the credit selection process and the quantitative procedures for evaluating changes in credit standards and credit collection. We reviewed the procedures for quantitatively considered cash discounts, changes in cash discounts, acceptance of these cash discounts as far as aspects of term credits and credit monitoring. We talked about the management of receipts and disbursements, including float, speeding up collections, slowing down payments, cash concentrations, zero balance accounts, and investing in market securities. Okay, so that concludes part 2 of chapter 15. Thank you very much. See you next time.